Hello, and welcome to Writing Escapades, Episode 7. My name is David Rawding. I'm an author, former English professor, podcaster, YouTuber, and today I'm very lucky to have on the show Michelle Shure. Michelle is a voiceover artist, and she's done 15 books. And as a reader and as an author, I'm very interested in learning more about narrators and what they do and how they hone their craft. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Michelle, thanks for coming on Writing Escapades. You are the first official guest on the show, and I'm stoked because voiceover artists absolutely fascinate me.
Thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate this. So
absolutely. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you became a voiceover artist?
Okay. Well, I am from Colorado. Married, have 3 kids, and part of how I got into this is really just because my oldest was getting ready for college. And I mean, at this point, I had been a stay-at-home mom for, like the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And of course, college tuition, expenses, he started stressing out about the cost of everything. And so I told him not to worry about it. I figured I would go back to work. Honestly, I did not want to go work for anybody again. And have to work to somebody else's schedule. So I started looking at some of the different options I could do, from maybe work from home, something I could do kind of like consulting, anything. Well, I love to read. I've listened to audiobooks forever. And I started to just kind of think, well, I wonder what all is involved in that. So I actually, it was probably like 6 months that I spent just kind of researching information as far as how you even get into it before I even put out my first audition.
Okay.
Because I was just so nervous about the idea of it, but my husband was so supportive and totally on board with it. And so got kind of a little setup, going, and I put out my first audition, and it's been going ever since. And that was like January of 2020 when I actually first started.
Wow. It's great because you can work remote in times like these.
It is, and it also isn't, especially when everybody is home with you through.
That's true.
This nice little event we've had. Then things get interesting. That's when, like, all of a sudden I'll be checking the audio and I hear somebody yelling at a video game in the background.
Yeah, I can
interesting
see that,
things. But that's really like how I got started with this, because it was so out of anything I've ever done in my past. So,
well, just from what I've heard and from that short time period, you've really, 15 audiobooks. That's no small feat, not at all.
You know what? It's crazy because it is, but it isn't. Because there are some people who are at it all the time and will put out like 3-4 books in a month.
That's wild.
Yeah, I know. And I think part of it too is because I don't do it full time. I'm still a mom. I still get the kids back and forth to school. I still have to let the dogs in and out of the house. Everything that goes along with it. So, my working hours are basically during the school day. So, but yeah, it is. It's one of those things that my first year I did, let's see here, 4 books my first year, or 5. I'm getting confused. But then the rest of them I actually did this past year. And a lot of that, I think, was because I finally upgraded my equipment, my room, my software, everything like that. And that's when everything started to really pick up for me. So
that's all right. People, they can see it on the YouTube, but on the podcast, she's in her soundproof room. Is that correct term?
Well, not really soundproof, but
Okay.
it is acoustically treated.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we did actually kind of proof it as much as we could. Thankfully, my dad and my husband are both very handy.
Mm-hmm.
So we just converted this very small closet, like literally I can touch the wall over here and I can touch this wall over here. So, but they added in like electricity. So I have outlets in here. I have
Mm-hmm.
like a light fixture in here with light switches, the whole bit. And then we just treated it as best as we could. So, yeah.
Looks fantastic.
Well, thank you. I rather like it.
Nicely done. Nicely done. This is a pretty basic question. I've seen a lot of terms thrown around, but what is the preferred term for your profession? Is it voiceover artist, audiobook narrator, voice actor, actress?
It seems like most people tend to go for a voice actor or
Mm-hmm.
voiceover artist
Mm-hmm.
just because that is the general term. And so audiobook narrator is really a kind of sub section of that. And really that's all of the experience that I've had as far as voiceover or voice acting goes. So I tend to call myself a narrator just because I don't have experience in any other field yet,
Sure.
but you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your favorite part about doing voiceover work?
Oh my gosh. Really, there's a few things. I mean, just because I do love to read so much. So that I think is the biggest win because I get paid to read.
That's fantastic.
Literally, people
Yeah.
are paying me to read their book.
Yeah.
And then I think honestly, the next thing after that is the fact that I have gotten to work with actual authors, see, now I'm getting tongue tied, actual authors. And so that way, when I get done reading their book, when you get done and you're like, wow, and then all of a sudden you have all these questions, I get to ask them these questions.
That's true.
So to me, that's actually like very exciting. I just try really hard not to geek out too much when I get on there and start asking them. So that way I still sound very professional in my email, you know?
Great. It's actually funny because it's the opposite with us. I mean, we're actually fascinated by you and all my people I've talked to that, I told people I was going to interview somebody who's a, voiceover actor and actress. And then they were just loaded with questions, and most of them are writers, and they're asking me like, oh, ask her this, ask her that. And I'm like, listen, you guys, and they're all the same questions that I have too. So I think there's a lot that just isn't known, I guess, because it is such a unique profession, a unique kind of career choice that it seems like it's getting bigger.
Oh, I believe that because honestly, even once after I started auditioning, there was so much more involved in it than I even learned to begin with.
Sure.
So it's one of those things that, yeah, I made some mistakes, but you learn from them. You just keep going.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it is. It's one of those things that there's so much more involved to it. And it seems like you hear about it a lot more now. And I don't know if it's just because I'm part of that community now that it seems like I start getting these things more and more on my feed because of it. You know how Siri likes to listen, I guess. I don't know, but
she does.
But yeah, you start all of a sudden seeing it and hearing it more often. Yeah.
Who are your influences and who are your favorite voiceover artists working today?
Oh my gosh. I have a lot of favorites, honestly, because there are so many great, talented people out there. Really, Christine Vam. Okay. She does a lot of voiceover, not just audiobooks, although she has a ton of audiobooks. She does, I mean, kind of a little bit of everything. I know that she's done like different video games. She's done like, I think animation. I mean, a lot of different areas, but she is amazing. Absolutely love her. Andy Arndt. She's another great narrator. God, for some of the guys, Teddy Hamilton. Oh my God, great voice. great voice. Does a lot. He does a lot of romance novels. So I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually trying to get into that. I have not read like any, and I'm always about trying different genres. So I gotta start reading some romance. So Teddy, what's his last name?
Teddy Hamilton.
Teddy Hamilton. Maybe he's the one to start off with.
Yeah, because he's got that great voice, male voice that you want in a romance novel.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now I'm actually listening to a book. It's called The Eagle and the Dragon.
Okay.
It's actually narrated by Harry Frost. It's another narrator that I'm friends with online because he's from the UK. So, but he's another one that has that great British accent. You know, you could just listen to it all day.
No,
so
it's understandable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but that's what I'm listening to right now. So
cool.
Takes me forever to get through with an audiobook though, because I don't get to listen while I work. So
yeah, it's kind of a bummer. Right now I'm listening to Jane Goodall's Hope, and I don't know, she is just, there's something about her voice where like it just feels, it's very motherly. It just feels very calm, and it's just, you just can tell. Yeah, her personality just comes through, and she's just such an interesting person. So
nice.
I love audiobooks there. Again, that's why I'm fascinated. That's why I have so many questions, because I want to know. My next question is, how do you find and choose your projects?
Oh man. Actually auditions. I do a lot of auditions. Mostly through ACX.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if authors may know about it already. It's the Audiobook Creation Exchange is what it is. Basically run by Amazon and Audible, but authors can go on, post their books, put a script on there, people go through, and it is literally like, I think the last time I looked, there's well over 1,000 books listed total.
Wow.
That are up for audition right now. But of course I narrow it down. So that way I look and see what's there, what's available, and I mean, kind of base it on that as far as who I audition for.
That actually kind of leans into my next question, which is what are your favorite genres to narrate for?
Really, I like fantasy. I like the paranormal, the sci-fi, romance. I don't know. Those are kind of like some of the ones that I get picked for all the time. I would love to get to do a thriller. I mean, something very suspenseful like that, but I don't know. I've auditioned for a few of those. I'm thinking maybe I just don't have the right voice for it. But yeah.
I mean, I'm just listening to the one to Volk. There's lots of moments in that. It's a sci-fi, but there's moments in that where it's certainly a thriller and has suspense, and I think you do a great job with just kind of, you know, varying your pace and adjusting it so that the intensity it does kind of ratchet up a little bit, and you get that out, at least for me as a reader, for sure, or audiobook listener.
Well, thank you. And yes, audiobooks do count as reading, I think.
I believe for sure that you're reading a book, you know, it just happens to be being told. So this is, I guess, probably a tough question. I imagine it depends on the length of the book, but how long does a typical project take?
Yeah, like you said, it really does depend on the length of the book. But a good way to kind of figure is for every finished hour of audio, my current workflow right now, I'm down to about 6 hours of work for 1 hour of audio.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, that is a huge improvement from when I very, very first started, like almost 2 years ago. I mean, that very first book I did, oh my God, it was frightening how long it took me to get it done. I mean, it was brutal. But yeah, it is. It's kind of like most narrators, they figure to estimate around 9,000 words per hour. as
Wow.
far as like your reading pace. And I mean, that does vary also, because so it depends. Is it real heavy dialogue that you're switching back and forth?
Mm.
Is it like a nonfiction book that you don't have to worry about trying to make it different, very dramatic, Something like that would probably pace a little bit faster. But yeah, if your book, figure about 9,000 words, will be an hour of audio for your book. And then
Right.
for that 1 hour, it's going to be about 6 hours of work for me.
Oh, it's good to have a calculus. It does sound like it is quite challenging. I mean, that's just on your vocal cords alone.
Well, and not all of that is actually the vocal part of that. Honestly, the majority of that work is spent in the editing process
Okay.
and in the prep work that goes before I even get in front of the microphone.
Mm.
So, because I mean, I do a lot of work on the script before I even get into the booth with it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a long day.
yes, it can be.
So I had heard of ACX, and I'll give you a little dose of my own experience working with a voiceover artist. The process was really cool. I loved it, and I got a couple dozen auditions, which again was just the coolest part. It's really cool as an author to get all these different voices just reading your stuff, and you get to kind of choose. I mean,
Yep.
it's pretty cool. So it was great, and I found one that I thought captured the feel of the book. And I listened. I even did some research and listened to his other audiobooks, and I just really liked his style. So we worked together for maybe a month. I did some brief chapter descriptions to give him something to go off, and added some notes. He gave the book a read through, and then we started kind of emailing back and forth once he started narrating. So he would send me kind of like big audio file chunks for the chapters, and I would listen to it and kind of look for errors. And then he'd send me back, then I'd send him back the errors and issues, and he would fix. And it was kind of a back and forth. I guess my question is this like kind of a typical experience between a voiceover artist and an author?
Somewhat, yeah. I know a lot of people do exactly like that. As far as like my own process, I actually have what I call a welcome packet.
Oh, wow.
Um, it's something that I actually learned from Sarah Puckett. She's another narrator, amazing. She's
Mm,
actually super, super helpful. She shares a lot of information that she has learned through her process to kind of help out newer narrators.
mm,
And so, kind of just going off of what she had, personalized it to myself and what works for me. But that way, especially for authors who have never done an audiobook before, I can send that to them, and it lays out everything. It answers a ton of questions as far as like what happens when, how do we do this?
oh, wow.
What happens after the book comes out? What sort of input do I need? Kind of things like that. But
I
that
like
is,
that.
yeah, that's actually the first thing I send to any author I work with for the first time, just because it really does. It sets up the expectations and kind of gives us clear roles as far as where we're at. But
Nice.
yeah, and it does. It's like I have a whole section on there where I want to know about the characters
Hmm.
of the book, so anything that they feel is important that I know about even before I start reading the book. So is it somebody who has had a hard life, I mean, are they kind of like an attitude because of it,
Mm.
or have they kind of just pulled away from society from it, and just become withdrawn and avoid people and, it's different things like that. Um, Especially if there's accents.
Yes.
Definitely need to know about that.
Yes. You definitely want to know, like, what kind of accents do I need to learn, you know?
Exactly, because then that way I know right off whether or not I will not be the right fit for the project.
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
So, yeah. I'm like, I am not gonna be one that tries to fake it.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, you said that you had narrated 15 titles since you began, but have you considered doing anything besides audiobooks? I'm talking about commercials, video games, radio, YouTube, podcasts?
Honestly, I think doing video games, that would be awesome. Especially because, I mean, my kids play games all the time, you know? They're teenagers and they have certain games that they absolutely love and will continue to replay over and over and over, even though they know how it ends.
Reread books, so
Exactly,
I
because
get
I
it.
think that's part of it, because it does. It's like these games now, they have a story to it. So, like my daughter, I mean, she loves that game, The Last of Us. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Kind of like
They're
a
turning it into
post-apocalyptic.
yeah, and they're turning it into a show on HBO, I guess.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, I mean, she plays that game. She's played through a few times on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it'd be very cool to hear you in a video game. That would be fantastic. I hope you get
That
one.
would be awesome. But someday.
Yeah. So you told me before a little bit about your home studio. You're on the YouTube, you can see it. If you're on the podcast, you can't. So check it out on the YouTube. But could you describe the kind of the space you're in and the gear you're using?
Well, this actually was a little storage closet in my basement. Um, and when things finally started progressing, that I had my first year done, I took a little bit of that money and reinvested it. And we went ahead and refitted this little closet, took out all of the shelving so that way I would have space. It's actually, we set it up so that way I have a little standing desk that's built in. So that way I have all the space underneath it that I can use. I have another little shelf for all of my little extras, you know. But I like to stand when I'm working. And so I have my little anti-fatigue mat, you know, very nice. Oh God, yeah. I kind of wish my whole floor was made of that.
Yeah.
It is. It's amazing.
Yes.
But yeah, it's like I just have this very small space. So I just have what I need in here, have my laptop, my microphone, the interface, and my headphones, and that's everything I need. So yeah.
I know, like, just with podcasts, one of the places they say is actually one of the best places to record is in a closet full of like clothes and things that just, you know, can absorb the sound. I mean, you've obviously got the walls with the foam that seems like it would do a good job of soundproofing, but I guess if you don't have anything, you know, a closet might be the best spot.
Yeah, and they do. And I know a lot of narrators actually do work in their closets like that until they like can one day spring for one of those big, beautiful, like booths that you get and you order and come and you assemble them. And then it's so professional, you know. My first space actually, because we had our computer desk here in the basement, I just set comforters up. Like I literally had comforters tacked to the walls around the computer and got like some of those real heavy, what are they called? Those blackout curtains.
Yes.
And I put up a curtain rod so that way I could close it and have a smaller space to work in. And that's where I started. So
well, you've come a long way. This is really cool. I mean, I even like the little the lights accenting the top.
Oh yeah, well, because I decorated for Christmas last weekend, so there was a random strand of lights. So I was like, oh well, I'll just decorate for Christmas. Put the little tree in my room. I'll be festive.
Yeah,
you know?
Keep you in a good mood. You know. I guess that's a pretty good segue into my next question, which was, what would you tell somebody who is thinking about getting into doing voiceover work?
Oh my goodness. It's amazing. It is amazing. It is one of those things though, a lot of like seasoned narrators, they will tell you this is not a get rich quick. You know, I know there's like a lot of videos out there, a lot of different like TikTok things and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, you can make $1,000 working 5 hours. like,
oh, that sounds nice.
I'm like, really? I'm like, who did that? So But they all say this is a marathon, not a sprint. So definitely do your research. I mean, listen to audiobooks, figure out what you like, and who you like and why do you like them, and take what you learn from listening to them and make it your own. Everybody does. They all talk about the fact that you should get a coach. And I mean, if you can afford a coach, yes, that is definitely something you want to do. I mean, there are coaches to help you with your actual acting portion.
Okay.
There are coaches that will help you with the business side of it. There are coaches that can help you with all of the tech that is involved in it. Because honestly, people who are starting out, you're everything. You are the voice actor, you're the sound engineer, you're the director, you're the proofer, you're everything.
Business owner. I mean,
exactly. You wear many, many hats. So definitely do all of the research, because so much more is involved in it. And if you are still wanting to try it, absolutely go for it.
All right.
But you definitely want to make sure that when you are putting that audio out, it is professional. Because as soon as somebody is starting to pay you, you are a professional. Yeah.
It's true. If you're getting paid for something, you're professional. That's absolutely right.
Yes. And the quality should reflect that. So, yeah.
And I like that portion of kind of picking, because, you would get dozens of auditions for at least for my first book, got to listen to dozens. And some of them, I mean, I was listening for audio quality, and I was listening for, I guess they're just general acting chops. And some of them, were almost too good. I was like, yeah, this is great, but it just seems like it's too good. Like, and then some of them, and I just kind of find somebody that fits your project. And I think that's, I don't know, it feels really sacred after that, because you're like, this is the voice. This is the voice that's going to give breath to the words. And it's interesting. It's very interesting. And I think other writers are also just as fascinated as I am.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder whenever I do auditions, like how many other people have actually put in for it, So it's like, well, you audition and you forget about it, is what you're supposed to do. Don't keep checking, don't keep obsessing about it. Put out the audition and move on to the next one.
That's a healthy approach.
Well, I've tried. Because it is. I mean, you get more rejections than you do get offers. And that's just the way it goes. So you have to let it go.
It's a lot of the same stamina, I guess, you have as an author, because you're sending out query letters, you're trying to get publishers, you're trying to get agents. I guess I would give the same advice for writers that are just kind of starting out, and just keep at it, stay positive. There's always going to be, hopefully somebody that can find your work, and hopefully if you just keep at it and you're persistent, you can get it onto the right person's desk. But it sounds like a lot of the similarities just in that, it feels like it's throwing stuff into the void, but you never know. Like, you just never know. So I know you talked a little bit about your gear. I know some microphones are very sensitive, and they pick up those lip smacks, those jaw clicks, the tongue noises. One tip that you mentioned when we first chatted was that eating green apples can help limit mouth noises. I should have had a green apple before this. I love that tip. Are there any other tips when it comes to speaking into a microphone, or when it comes to editing?
Really, for the speaking, hydration. Hydration.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, seriously, hydration is key. I mean, if I know I'm going to be in the booth, I always up my water intake, like the day before, and then the whole time during. And so, like, days that I'm in the booth and I know I'm going to be recording, I mean, I'm drinking like 120 ounces of water a day.
That's good.
So, I mean, yeah, it is. It's good. And it's crazy, though, because you actually lose so much even just talking. that at the end of the day, I'm still thirsty.
I believe it.
It's crazy. Yeah. So,
And
I mean,
you live in Colorado. It's kind of a dry area, so I imagine you certainly want to keep drinking water for sure.
yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things, especially now. I mean, the heater clicks on at night.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually will run the humidifier at night.
Yes.
I'll run it in my bedroom at
Yeah.
night. So that way it's like on my side of the bed blowing at me.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I don't wake up with that crazy, scratchy feeling in your throat.
Wow.
Yeah. No, not fun. Yeah. Yeah. Try to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yep. So I listened to your narration of Volk, book 1 of the Overseer series by author Zach Fortier. Did I say that correctly?
Fortier.
This sci-fi novel contains robots, an invasion on humanity, AI, a hacker, a collection of unique characters, and even a bit of courtroom legal drama. For those interested, Volk by Zach Fortier, narrated by Michelle Shure. It's Michelle Shure, right?
Sure. Yes.
Sure.
Trust me, I'm sure.
Shure, for those interested, is available. So this book is available on Amazon and Audible. It was very interesting listening to this because I found myself really focusing on your voice, knowing that you'd be on the show. So I have to say that the audio is incredibly clean and seems seamless to me. You do a good job at pacing and switching to match the story's intensity. And I thought that your voice sounded like incredibly smooth and clear. Your timing, your pauses, and your voice to me sounded very natural. It made me really start to wonder how much work goes into fixing sound issues in your editing software.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's very kind.
Absolutely. I'm a fan.
Really, the editing portion, I have gotten much better at. I have gotten better at editing. That was kind of the bane of my existence when I first started, not gonna lie. But this year I switched my software. I switched my DAW that I use Studio One version 5 now. And then I also use what's called RX8. It's put out by Isotope. That actually makes editing so much easier, so much faster. I took a course online to learn how to actually work it, just because I get frustrated really easily when it comes to technology.
Yep. I get that.
Yeah. Don Barnes has a course for both of these programs that I did. Oh my God, he is an amazing teacher. He made it an easy, quick process to where I was actually using both programs within a day.
Wow.
So yeah. And I mean, I was still having to kind of follow step by step of what I had taken as far as his notes went. But it's gotten to where now I have the process to where it works best for me as far as my editing goes. And it's funny because when I do have to go back and record the pickups and make all those little fixes and then punch them in place and try and match everything up, I mean, it's actually a lot easier to do that now because I can actually like just take that little section. I'm like, oh, that's a little too quiet. No, that's not matching up. So now we need to kind of increase just that one tiny little thing that I fixed. And my husband laughs at me because I tell him I'm going to be an editing ninja.
Yes.
Because nobody even knows I was there,
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
So yeah, it is. It's a lot easier and a lot better now that I switched over. But it's kind of one of those things that it's frustrating. It's almost a game to me that I'm like, I don't want to have anything that I have to go back and fix.
Yes.
I'm like, I want it to be right the first time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, stuff like that, a lot of it comes down to like proofing. So that is actually another thing that audiobooks and different voiceover people will have. There are people out there who work as proofers and will actually match everything up, not just like as far as like the dialogue, the actual match word for word to your book, but they actually will go through and make sure even the character voices are right.
Oh, wow.
They're like, wait a minute, you used the wrong voice on this. And they'll catch those things and they'll let you know. So that way, if you missed it during, whether it was the recording or when I listened to it, because I listen to it. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. So I'll go back and I'll redo like a couple lines, things like that. Just because I'm like, no, I don't like where I put the emphasis on that word. So let's switch this and do different takes. But they will catch different things like that as far as like the voices, and they're like, no, this sounds weird, or no, you mispronounced this. And it's a word that you've been saying your whole life. And you're like, wait a minute, I mispronounced that? I'm like, I've been saying that wrong?
Oh no.
Really?
Wow, I didn't even know proofers existed. I thought that was kind of on the author to do that, but there's a third party that can.
Yeah, and I mean, that is actually an expense that falls onto the narrator.
Oh,
That's
okay.
So, I mean, eventually I would like to get to the point where I can actually outsource even my sound engineering, my editing portion.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
So that way, all I have to do is give somebody my raw audio and they go ahead and they make me sound beautiful, you know, and they clean up the background and they take care of all those awful little mouth noises that we talked about and, you know, different things like that. So eventually I would like to get to where I have an sound engineer editor that I work with. Would be amazing.
So do you, I guess my question off that is, so you obviously enjoy kind of the actual narration, maybe a little bit more than the actual editing?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I really do. It's because I just get to come in here and play pretend, you know?
Yeah.
So I get to be all of these different people. I get to be all of these different characters. I get to be the villain, you know? I actually really like it when I get to be a good villain.
Yeah.
So
villains are great. Everybody loves villains. I mean, there's
yeah, exactly. They're so much fun. Yeah.
Interesting. So just for fun, when I was listening to your narration, I sped it up 3 times and then I slowed it way down. And when you slow it really down, when you slow anything really down, I guess, it just makes the person who's talking sound kind of drunk. So it's pretty hilarious. But have you done this? Have you ever messed around just to see?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was one of my other books. Somebody had put a review and she was like, wow, I sped it up to this. And I was like, Jesus, that was really fast. I was like, so I
Whoa.
sped it up to it. And I was like, holy crap. It was like, I sound like that little squirrel or whatever from over the hedge.
It's good. It's funny.
I mean, it was hilarious.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people do. They tend to like speed up their audio when they're listening to it. I know my kids are guilty of that. And I always get on them. I'm like, okay, fine if it's a textbook or something like that that you're listening to. I'm like, but if it's a story, I'm like, you're losing part of the story when you do that. I'm like, you're losing all of those dramatic pauses when you do that.
That's right.
I'm like, I've tried to get on them. They've gotten slightly better, but I think it's one of those things that they just get impatient. They just want it done.
Yeah.
So, but I know a lot of people do that now too. They'll speed everything up. And I'm like, are you really enjoying it though?
It's true.
That's what I kind of wonder.
Yeah, no, I definitely just like that kind of raw version where it's just exactly the pacing and the pausing, because there's art to the pause, and just there's a reason why punctuation is so powerful of a tool for writers to use. It's, you know, this emphasis. It's
exactly. I'm like, and that's part of it is, I mean, you're doing that because that's the way it was written. That's the way the author intended it to be read. That's the way they heard it in their own head, you know?
So I saw on your Instagram at Michelle Shure, V-O, and it's Shure is spelled S-H-U-R-E, that you had a new audiobook release recently titled Saved, which is the 3rd book in a series. Can you tell me a little bit about that series and your experience narrating that story?
Yeah. It was actually a lot of fun. A trilogy by Callie Mann. It's about shifters, and it's one of those reverse harem. I don't know if you're familiar since you don't really listen to romance yet.
Let's hear about it.
But basically reverse harem, instead of like a harem of one man and multiple women, it is now a woman with multiple men.
Okay.
So
all right.
yeah. So
Interesting.
that's basically what it was, and she was an orphan, found out she's a shifter, ends up going to the school, starts discovering different things about herself, figuring out what kind of shifter she is, and everything just kind of unravels. But she does. It's like she ends up finding her mates, and they end up taking care of the bad guy, of course, eventually. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do these characters because they were all different creatures and they were all based on their elements. So like there was an earth shifter, which tend to be like the mammals like wolves and jaguars and things like that. And then there's water shifters, so like water animals or mermaids. There was air shifters, which apparently also were like birds, but also vampires. Yeah, they also had like vampire characteristics.
Okay.
And then there were fire shifters. So it's like she did each of the different elements kind of thing. And then of course, fire shifters got a dragon. So
yes.
So that was fun. Yeah.
Now, could this dragon talk?
Actually, he could talk to her in his head.
Oh,
like they could hear each other. Yeah.
Very cool.
Exactly. So
did you probably enjoyed narrating this? Did you enjoy just kind of reading it as well?
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that honestly, I've gotten to where the books that I do are books that I would read.
Yeah.
So
it's a good place to be.
Because I learned very, very early on that you don't want to do books that you would not enjoy reading yourself. It makes it a very long process, and it actually does turn into a lot of work. So, yeah. Do
you feel like that's one of those things where I know they say that you can almost tell when somebody's smiling on the other end of a phone call? Do you think it's something where you could almost tell that you were listening to an audiobook where the voice actor or actress wasn't enjoying themselves?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I totally think so. Yeah. Because I mean, honestly, I haven't done nonfiction because I don't think I would be very good at it.
Sure.
So I don't even audition for nonfiction books.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, I think I would end up sounding bored. So I avoid it. And I mean, that's just my personal preference. There are a lot of people who do like the educational, and they do the different things like that with nonfiction stories. And I mean, they're great at it. They actually keeps everything engaged.
Yes.
So I don't have that talent.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it, it's like anything, passion. I mean, my passion is writing fiction. So I rarely write anything that is nonfiction, but when I do, I definitely feel like a fish out of water. I mean, books for me have always been an escape, whether I'm reading them or writing them, Yeah.
Exactly.
I was going to actually ask you, have you written anything yourself? Anything you've ever thought about writing?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, honestly, I don't think I am organized or could stay focused long enough to actually do that. Yeah, no, I'm like, there are some days, even just being in the booth, I'm like, Jesus, I'm like, what is the matter with me today? I'm like, I am getting nothing done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things that I really don't think I could stay focused enough to do that. That I think like what you do is amazing to me, because I mean, I'll have an idea, but it just stays that one tiny little idea. It doesn't get any bigger. It doesn't get any more detailed. It just stays that tiny little nugget, So
yep.
Yeah. Taking that one thing and making it into a whole big picture is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the other way. I'm interested in like doing some narration, and I'm going to try some stuff, but it just seems very daunting of a task. I think alone, the software, being a sound engineer, learning all that side. I use kind of a basic software which does the job, but it's another level. I mean, and people that are really into audiobooks, they kind of expect that really clean, crisp, because if everybody else is out there putting out really clean audio and then you get one that's kind of like, it's just not up to par, I think it will come out and it might ruin their experience, if it's that significant.
Yeah, no, I know, because like how we talked about a little bit of the software you were using and everything. And I mean, that's actually what I started with. That's what I did my whole first year of using Audacity, because it was free.
Yeah.
So that's honestly why I started, because when I did bring everything together, I was trying to keep my initial cost as low as I possibly could.
Yep.
While still being acceptable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I started with a little USB mic and using Audacity, and I had a little shield that I used behind my microphone to kind of help with the noise. But I mean, it was one of those things that I am so glad when I finally got to upgrade, because seriously, even just going from the USB mic to then using a good microphone with an interface, oh my God, huge difference in my sound quality. I mean, it was one of those things that you did. All of a sudden, you could hear those little slight changes when you are going through like an intense scene or something that's very quiet. It's like it all of a sudden reflected more of what I was actually saying and doing,
Yeah.
But even once I switched, I was still using the old software because I had the new one, but I hadn't figured out how to use it yet.
That's a hurdle.
Yeah. Because I'm not very good when it comes to technology stuff like that. I get frustrated really easy. So yeah, because before I even did Studio One, I actually tried Reaper, because so many people had talked about, the different softwares that are good for audiobooks and narration. And it's like Reaper was one of them. And it was another one that it was kind of not necessarily an open source, but it was a lot cheaper than other softwares out there and available.
Yep. And
so yeah, I downloaded it because exactly. And then they had like a free trial that you could try it out for whatever 60 days kind of thing before you actually had to pay and license it. Oh, holy moly. I got so lost on the tutorials trying to figure out how to use it that I'm like, what did I click? Now all of a sudden my screen doesn't look the same that it did. I was like, and I couldn't figure out what I had clicked on.
Yeah.
So I was like, at that point I was done.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't get it back. I couldn't get it back. So I was just done. I was like, nope, I need something else. I need something where I can get a teacher and they will show me exactly how to use this. So
it's awesome you found what works for you and a good kind of teacher coach.
Oh yeah. Don Barnes is amazing. And he's great, because even if things pop up later on, you can message him and he'll get back to you. That's great. He's like, oh, hey, no. He's like, it's super easy. Don't do that. He's like, just click on this. There's a shortcut. Do this. I mean, he's very, very supportive and wants everybody to be able to do their best with it, So yeah, definitely.
It's a good resource for people that are kind of interested, for sure. So I guess at this point, I'm going to kind of use some of the questions that were I posted on my Instagram and asked for people to ask some questions. And I got some from my Instagram. I got some from my writer friends. So at this point, I want to make sure that I get those ones in. Okay. So here's a question from a writer friend of mine named Ian Mitchell, who just finished his first draft of an epic fantasy novel. And I just wanted to say congrats to Ian for landing the plane. That's awesome. And I'm pumped for him. Good job, buddy. So Ian asks, what tricks do you use to ensure you're using the right voice through flowing dialogue between multiple characters? He says he kind of struggles with this when he's reading to his own kids. And he asks, do you use something like different colored fonts to help remind you which voice to use, or what method do you kind of use?
Yeah, actually, That's pretty much what I do, actually.
Yeah.
Once I get the manuscript, I go through a lot to prep it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, the first time I read it, I actually read it just to know the story. And
Yep.
so that way I can enjoy it myself,
Yep.
Um, but at the same time, as I'm going through, it's like I'll bookmark certain pages, that just pop up. So that way I can go back and be like, okay, I had a question about this. And that's where I had a question for this. And that's where I had another question,
Mm-hmm.
different things like that. But then once I get everything answered, I can go in and make notes on it, because it's like I'll get a PDF of the manuscript. So
Yep.
that way then I have my iPad, I go through and I actually highlight the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Each of the main characters has their own color. So that way everything is color coded for me as far as the dialogue goes.
Yeah.
And so like some books, I have a lot of colors going through
Yeah.
my
Those big
manuscript.
fantasy ones.
Yeah, especially when they do have, I mean, even if it's not a main character, even if it's a secondary character, but maybe has a lot of lines,
Mm-hmm.
they get their own color,
All right.
because I need to remember their voice. Um, so they all get their own little color highlighter as I go through. But then I also, um, well, I mean, you've done the audiobook. So, like when you do your checkpoint at the beginning, that
Yes.
the narrator gives you your extended sample. So that way you can say, yes, it sounds great. Let's go
Mm-hmm.
for it. Or no, I don't really like this voice. Let's try something different.
Yep.
When I do that, I actually try to include all of the major characters in that sample. So that way they can hear all of the voices that I'm going to be using. So
I
I'll
like
have
that.
little snippets of dialogue for each of those characters. So that way they get an idea of what it's going to sound like in the book.
That sounds super
Um,
helpful.
but I use that because I actually save these character files, these audio files in under the book for that folder, so that way I can go back in case this character maybe was in chapter 2, but then doesn't show up again until chapter 34.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what did they
Yeah.
sound like
It's
again?
hard to, I
So
can't keep all that information in your head.
exactly. It's like I'll go back and I'll listen to what I did. So that way I'm making sure that when they show up again in chapter 34, all of a sudden they don't like have some sort of crazy accent, or now they sound like they've aged 20 years.
Yeah. It would be very
So
jarring for a reader.
exactly.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Do they recast them?
Exactly. Got recast mid-season.
Yes, it happens. I mean,
It does. It really does.
um, another writer friend of mine asks, his name is Matt Martell. He asks, are there books that you don't enjoy narrating or that you avoid?
Probably kind of like how we were talking before about the nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to just not audition for any of those. So that way, I mean, like I said, yeah, I think I would sound so boring doing something like that. I think I would end up getting a little monotone, and that is not going to make for an engaging story or an
Mm-hmm.
engaging learning experience, especially for something like that, because you really do have to try and keep the person's attention, especially if it's like an e-learning,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good input. Matt also asks, how much input do you get from the author? We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but
That actually varies a little bit from author to author, I think. Because like with the welcome packet,
mm-hmm.
I'll ask for a character sheet, and it's like I'll give them kind of different points to think about so that way they can include it. And really it's up to them as far as how much information they want to give me when it comes to that. So it can be like, okay, about how old are each of these characters? So that way I have that idea, first of all.
Yep.
What kind of background do they have? Do they have any accents? Um, and one thing I have learned too, especially if it's a series, is it a character that maybe seems secondary in book 1, but ends up becoming important in book 2? Because that actually influences what voice you do. because you want to make sure it's something that you can sustain for a longer period of time.
That's true.
You know, I mean, it's a lot easier to do some awkward, weird little voice if it's a small character that doesn't have a lot of lines and is going to go away, you know,
Yeah,
but
you're right. Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
yeah, you want something that's going to be a lot easier vocally on you and able to do over a longer period of time if it's going to maybe end up being one of the main characters in book 2 or book 3. You know, or even if it's somebody who you might suspect is kind of an antagonist and then maybe has some sort of other redeeming quality later on. You don't want to do a voice that everybody is going to hate this person from book 1 and then all of a sudden they're not hateable, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, just little things like that is what I try to find out when it comes to like the character input. But it's like that 15-minute checkpoint is super, super important because I want to make sure that what I'm going to do after that point, you're going to be happy with.
Yes.
And because I know that is something that really, I think most all narrators put in their information is that once that 15-minute check is approved, it's out of your hands.
I think that's how it should be.
It
I
is
don't
out of your
want
hands.
to step into your kitchen.
Yeah, it's like if I made a mistake, yes, tell me and I will fix the mistake. But if all of a sudden you don't like this voice, I can't go back and fix an entire book of that because all of a sudden now I'm doing an additional, Jesus, I have no idea how many hours depending on the length of the book, but it would be hours upon hours of extra work and editing in order to change that, you know? So
that's a really good tip and a piece of advice for other authors that are listening. Just listen to that and know that if you kind of sign off on the initial kind of voice concept, what's the term again? The first
the 15-minute checkpoint.
Yeah, if you sign off on the 15-minute checkpoint, like that's it. Like let the artist work, you know?
Yeah. It's like if there are actual mistakes, yes, definitely we will fix it. But really if it's just artistic, that's when you start getting into the area with that it can go south pretty quick.
Yeah, it's such a unique relationship, like, because it's, you know, you have to know that you're working with this author and that you guys have to at least kind of be able to like function as a team. So it's
yeah, because I do, and it's like even though I will ask questions before I do that 15-minute check, a lot of times different things will pop up that I didn't think of beforehand, and so I'll just send a quick email or quick message over saying, hey, what do you think about this? Is this correct or is it supposed to be this? You know, and just to get that little bit of input is amazing and very, very helpful and so valuable. It can actually make everything go a lot smoother in the end. So, yeah.
I have some more questions. I got one from Rob Schlosser. It's a writer friend of mine. He says, like an athlete, do you do anything to train or protect your voice?
Really kind of how we were talking about hydration and staying healthy. When I am going to be recording, I actually, it's so sad. I don't drink.
Yeah.
I avoid alcohol, you know, so I don't get to have my wine that I love.
That is rough.
But then I also tend to avoid dairy. It's like different things like that. And I mean, definitely just don't go longer than you know that you can. I mean, when I record, I'll record for about like an hour to an hour and a half at a time. And then I take like a 10-minute break. And that's usually when I'll go to the bathroom, I'll make another cup of tea, whatever. But that 10 minutes, no talking at all. No talking, just drink some water, get ready to go again, you know, and maybe listen to what I was working on before.
Yeah.
But definitely, you never want to get to the point that your throat is feeling sore or tired. Because if you've gone that long, you've gone too far.
Oh man, done
And then
irreparable damage.
and then you've got to let it rest. Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, really the only thing you can do is rest. So
Rob actually had a second question, which was, I like this question a lot because I just never know unless I had somebody like you to ask. How do you pronounce a word that has never been spoken aloud? And this happens all the time in fantasy novels.
Oh, yes. All of those wonderful made up fantasy names and places. And yep. Really stuff like that. If I don't get any information from the author during the character sheets and all that stuff, like I'll ask them, how do you want me to say this? And so if they write it out phonetically for me, great.
Yep.
Otherwise, a lot of times stuff like that, what I will do is in the 15-minute check, I will say all of those different names and stuff and different variations of how I think it should be read. And then I'm like, okay, is it number 1 or number 2? And, I'll give them the different options. And so that way they can come back and tell me, yes, do it like this. No, don't do it like this. Because it's their language, it's their name that they picked, so it's up to them how it sounds. So, and sometimes even if you write it out and you think, oh, it's supposed to sound like this, but then once I say it, they're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. It's like that sounds a little odd. So then
it also could be odd because it's never been said before.
Oh, believe me, there are times that even after a while, you keep saying a word and you're like, why does that sound so weird to me now? It's like, and it's a normal word that you use every single day, but all of a sudden it sounds off.
Yep. I've been there before.
Yes, absolutely.
I have another question from Instagram. This one comes all the way from England. Her name is Meg Shepherd Foster, who I know is a writer. And her question is, can you narrate your own audiobook and sell it on Audible? And I think basically the kind of question is that can an indie author narrate their own novel and sell it on Audible? And what's the process like?
Yeah, actually they can. I know that there is actually a thing on ACX. There's I want to say it's at the bottom of the page where it says something about authors as narrators.
Gotcha.
And it actually gives some guidance for any authors who are looking to narrate their own work. So it is one of those things that for the rights holder, their page on ACX looks slightly different than my page as a narrator.
Okay.
But if they can have the equipment and they're capable of producing the audio to the correct requirements and specifications in order for it to pass, then absolutely, yes, they can. And then they get all of their royalties and they don't have to worry about paying a narrator or sharing the royalties on that if that's the case. However, the only thing I think, because I know I've heard different discussions in different groups of narrators and authors, whether or not they should narrate their own work.
Yeah. Just knowing.
Yeah. I mean, because exactly, there's so much involved.
Yeah.
And I don't know, my way of thinking on that is if you're able to post your book on ACX and narrate it yourself, I would personally even think, why not open it up for auditions to see what it sounds like if you were to do it, do the actual audition script that you're putting out, narrate it yourself, completely master it, edit it, so that way as if you were actually putting it through their requirements to show up on Audible, and listen to what it sounds like with you as the narrator versus one of the other narrators that has auditioned for it. Because I mean, they have the experience in that field. It may come across differently, but I mean, of course, if it's your own memoir Who's going to know your story better than you?
It's true.
I mean, so there's, I think, a lot of different cases. So it depends on the book and whether or not the author themselves has experience and is able to fill that role as a narrator. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like when I listen, I'm just like, yeah, they know what they're doing. Like it sounds clean, they're really putting emphasis in it. And I think really, I actually like it. I enjoy, I mean, it's kind of like a little bit like I think somebody would feel if their book became a movie, it's like, I would never want to be part of the movie making process because I don't know nearly, I know nothing in that world, but I am just like, yeah, I'm just, it's, yeah, I'm more than happy to let somebody else take it and give life because, yeah, it's almost feels, it's just, you geek out because you're like, oh, this is so cool. They're like reading my book, So.
Oh yeah. I totally can understand that. Yeah.
And let's see, I've got one more question from Instagram. This is from author Deborah White. And Deborah asks, what equipment would you recommend? And that's pretty much like anything we haven't covered, I guess, like pop filters and mixers and microphones, like maybe just more additional information for people that may be kind of interested in the narration audio game.
Really, I think the biggest thing is before you invest in expensive equipment, your space is the first thing that you need to look at. That is the first thing that you actually should make any changes to or invest your money in, is to have a nice, quiet, well-treated space will actually take care of a lot of the issues that you would have with any microphone, really, because they're going to pick up all of those tiny little issues. So if you have a well-treated space, then I think the next best thing is to actually invest in getting a decent XLR microphone and interface. Just because, I mean, like I said, when I switched from the USB mic, oh my God.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that I listened to it and I was like, I wish I had done this sooner. I so wish I had done this sooner. Because it did. I think that right there was what made the biggest difference in my audio quality. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very helpful suggestions, and hopefully, that solved it for Deborah. So now I'm going to kind of like transition. How can an author who wanted to work with you get a hold of you? And I'll add these links, guys, below.
Well, I mean, my website is a great way because I do have a page on there that you can contact me. So just a quick message on there and I can get back to you. And really just letting me know what you're looking for. Because then even if I am not going to be the right fit, I might be able to point you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, I would love to do the books. I'd love to do all the books, but I know I am not the right voice for every book. So it's one of those things that there are certain people that I'm like, God, I'm really glad I didn't get that audition. I'm like, God, this person is perfect for this book.
Yeah.
There are different things because it's like, I will go back different books that I have auditioned for because I actually will add them onto my TBR list. And so when I maybe download it on my Kindle or I see that it did pop up on the Audible, I'm like, oh, I wonder who got that. So I'll go back and I'll listen and I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, yeah, that one, they fantastic.
Knocked
I'm like,
it out.
spot on. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, definitely my website is probably going to be the best way. You can send me a message on like social media, just instant message me through there. Don't be shocked if I then refer you to my email. Because there are a lot of questionables that will try to contact you through social media.
Oh, the internet.
Oh yeah. So it's such a joy.
Yeah. The goods and the bads,
Yeah, but I mean, you can try messaging me on there, and then I will probably still reference you over to my email.
Hmm.
But really, my website is going to be the best way if you are not already on ACX or Findaway
Hmm.
or Ahab. I'm on all of those platforms as well.
And if somebody wants to listen to your narration, where can readers find your work, and where can people specifically, I guess, follow you? And again, any links that she says I will put in the description.
Well, of course, you can follow me on Facebook, Michelle Shure VO, or on my Instagram, Michelle Shure VO,
All
again.
right.
Uh, but otherwise, all of my books you can find on Audible. I do have actually the Reverse Harem saved.
Yes.
That
Yes.
trilogy I just finished with
Hmm.
Callie Mann. She did go wide with that. So that is actually going to be available. I think it's also on Kobo and Chirp
Hmm.
and trying to remember which others. But yeah, she actually went wide with that. So that one you can find on far more than just Audible and iTunes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that was released a day ago, 2 days ago.
Uh, was it last week? Oh my gosh, all of my days have started to run together.
Yeah, clearly the same problem. It's your most recent one, though. That's fantastic. So wrapping it up, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. You're my first guest, and I have to say I was so ecstatic that you agreed to come on to Writing Escapades. Seriously, very, very ecstatic. And as an author and avid listener of audiobooks, I'm endeared to voiceover artists. You have a unique voice, and one that many readers and myself have enjoyed. Voice artists really, as I said in the beginning, kind of truly give life to words, and it's just, I think it's fantastic what you do. And for you, the listeners, you can find Michelle's links below. I'm going to go ahead and post them. And again, her website is Michelle Shure, SHUREVO.com. And it was great to meet you, Michelle, and thanks again for coming on. Really, really totally appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
Anytime.